It took nearly 2 months for the United States and Iran to get to a memorandum of understanding that both would accept, both would sign, and then start the negotiating process. So that was hard, but at least we got that done. Now, as we say, it's an understatement to say the devil's in the details of taking even the words in that MOU and then converting those into a negotiated settlement to actually end the war. And man, are we already seeing lots of headwinds against that, not even just from the different parties, but from the language itself and who meant what by what was written. And there's already, as you're going to see here on the U.S. side, attempts to rewrite the terms and to change them already because, what a surprise, a lot of people don't like them who loved the war. We'll get to all that in a minute, but we're going to have with us today back again is Patrick Henningsen, who is a journalist and geopolitical analyst with a lot of experience in the Middle East and especially in Iran. He is the founder of the news analyst website, 21stcenturywire.com, and host of the Sunday Wire Show. Patrick, as always, welcome back to our show.
It's great to be with you, Danny.
Well, it is. And I mean, listen, I'm really grateful here because you have insights that not a lot of others have because of your many, many years of covering this region. And I remember you went to Tehran even before this war started. So you kind of had your finger on the pulse at that time. And I'm just kind of interested in seeing what you have felt over time here. And we'll just start with this right here. With the signing of the MOU, President Trump has already a couple of times tried to imply that, well, he didn't mean that interpretation of the MOU. The Iranian side has said, well, here's our interpretation, and you might as well be talking English and Farsi. How do you see that so far?
Well, it's confusing because, this was the problem with this process to begin with, because the Iranians would release a document or a statement, and then the United States would, interpret or sort of publicize their version of that. And you started to see this divergence between what both sides were putting up as terms for what was called a deal before, but now finally, it's like after a week or two, people are finally calling it a memorandum of understanding. That took a while, but eventually they came to their senses on this. And I think that's what you're seeing in Switzerland is this lobbying from the United States side, this constant lobbying. It's like they're trying to put ideas out there into the public sphere, hoping that they'll somehow get traction and that's going to somehow move the goalposts or change the negotiations. But really, Iran's been very sort of resolute and steadfast in what their terms have been, really since really back to April. It's not a whole lot of difference there, but the United States is constantly trying to create wiggle room. They tried to change facts on the ground through the blockade. Various attacks against Iran over the last sort of 4 weeks, and really didn't do anything to change the fundamentals of the situation. And J.D. Vance is there in Switzerland. I have no idea why he's there and not the Secretary of State, which I think is somewhat strange and says a lot about this administration's sort of disorganization and unprofessionalness when it comes to diplomacy. But because you have a politician and not a civil servant or a cabinet civil servant, J.D. Vance is very political. So he's grandstanding right now. This is sort of the pre-campaign for his 2028 presidential run. He's doing all the podcast circuits. It's kind of obvious. We've been in politics for a while. We've seen all this sort of stuff going. That's kind of what J.D. Vance is doing. But he's kind of doing a disservice in some ways to the negotiations because he's saying some crazy things. And he's putting some ideas out there that he's telegraphing what they might want, or Trump's like classic deal or whatever. He had one statement, I don't know if you have it. We said, this is a classic Trump deal. We're going to do this. We're going to, steal the Iranian assets. Or we're going to take the money that we've frozen and use it to buy soya beans from American farmers.
Yeah, actually we do. And in fact, you preempted me a little bit here. I do want to talk about that because this particular soundbite we're going to play here, and Gary, will be the one called Frozen Assets. You mentioned the difference of definition of what the singular memorandum of understanding was signed by both sides. And one of those is on the issue of frozen assets, because you have the Iranian side said, and they've been saying this for a long time, and we talked about this, you and I on this show, is that has to be up front because they have no trust in us because of all the things that have happened really since Trump was inaugurated the first time with the getting rid of the JCPOA and all the wars and assassinations since that time. And so they said, before we do anything, there's going to have to be upfront sanctions relief and unfrozen assets. Well, J.D. Vance here talked about and used a different word that was associated with that. And you'll hear it about 100 times here, the word if.
We wanted to make sure that we set up a process where if we ever unfreeze Iranian assets, we can ensure that Iranian money goes to help the people of Iran and not to fund terrorism. So Jared Kushner actually came up with a very interesting solution with the Qataris, where basically, again, if there is any frozen Iranian assets that are unfrozen, then we have approval over that process. The Qataris have approval over that process. And then the money would actually go to buy American soy, American corn, and American wheat for the benefit of the Iranian people. And what Jared and the Qataris and the entire team accomplished is, to me, a classic Trump deal, where if Iranian assets are ever unfrozen, they're going to go to make American farmers richer and to feed the Iranian people. That's a very, very good and very classic Trump deal.
You know, I don't remember you, and I have not heard one word from anybody in Iran so far to validate that they view it the same way. What say you?
That's the sort of thing that's the only thing classic Trump about this is inserting little caveats and wedges into and moving the goalposts during negotiations. That's classic Trump. And that's what's upended so many other negotiations before, because this president has proven with his, I think, incompetent and inexperienced team that they don't know how to do diplomacy. They don't know how to get a binding agreement. They'll never get an accord, and they will never get a treaty, this administration. So from that point of view, they're hugely inferior to the Obama administration. At least the Obama administration is professional, and they have professional diplomats. And this is the result. This is the result of this kind of rank mediocrity with no real diplomats, sending like business associates from Long Island and your son-in-law. This is where it ends. It's what J.D. Vance, the fact he's telegraphing this means there's going to be automatic rejection by the Iranians. Does he realize this? This isn't a junior achievement like presentation in high school where you sign showing what you've got in your project. No, you keep these things under your lid if you want to negotiate. You're dealing with countries here. J.D. Vance is 41 years old, zero international political experience, and the president has put him up to basically front run these very, very important negotiations. Where's the Secretary of State? This is not a serious administration. And I'll tell you why this should be rejected by Americans, because what Trump's doing here, what J.D. Vance, this brilliant idea by Jared Kushner, it's corporate welfare. Normally, the U.S. government would give subsidies to those soya farmers that were devastated by Trump's China tariff debacle. That's who got affected, these same farmers. And he's wanting to use Iranian frozen assets to bail out Trump and the Trump administration for the absolute disaster of their tariff, just the worst possible result vis-a-vis China. That's all this is, corporate welfare. They want to get Iran to do the subsidies rather than the U.S. government. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable. In a way, it's embarrassing. And I'm going to make a criticism here, and I know everybody wants J.D. Vance to be successful, just because the horror of the Trump presidency is just too much even to comprehend on a certain level. But you have to pull him up on these things. This vapid confidence of you're like very confident talking there. He's very confident, but it's very shallow what he's saying. There's no depth to it, and what he's saying is just so unbelievably ridiculous. And, people should pull him up on this, because this is going to be a problem for negotiations. And that's not the only thing that he said. That is just, it shows that he has a zero understanding of the situation, economics, statecraft, and also Lebanese and Iranian politics and history and so forth. You need to know these things. That's why you have seasoned diplomats doing this type of a job, and not like a neophyte politicians that just did 2 years in the Senate and all of a sudden they're on the campaign trail, and now Trump's just sent him to be a face. You need more than a face. You need people who are really skilled technocrats with like 20 or 30 years experience, Chaz Freemans of the world. These are the types of people that can pull off what I call a diplomatic high wire act, because that's what it takes. The US started this war with Israel. They are not the victors. This is not Trump signed a surrender document in Versailles, which is very embarrassing, especially choosing that location, which Emmanuel Macron was like a Cheshire cat. Did you watch that ceremony?
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Trump was all mesmerized by the gold in place of it, and he had no concept of the history, but neither did anybody else on President Trump's team, which did him a disservice with that.
And the Europeans got one back at Trump on that. And, he should have competent advisors that would have recognized the optics of that.
Exactly.
And who are his advisors? And JD Vance doesn't have competent advisors, because you can see he's totally uninformed on the actual politics and geopolitics of the region. He's just like grabbing talking points, but he's a confident, what I would call situational conversationalist. He's very skilled in that. He's very confident in like kind of bouncing around through talking points and conversations, very animated and likable in interviews. But there's it's nice house, nobody home. There's nothing there. There's no depth to it. And so who are the advisors to this administration? Is it Sebastian Gorka? He overlooked that one that we learned in 8th grade history class. Yeah, Germany, the Kaiser signed the most humiliating surrender document in history in the Palace of Versailles after World War I. I mean, it's not a good look. But what it says, and I'm not just making fun of the Trump administration, Danny, I'm just saying that what that demonstrates is the kind of rank incompetence of this administration, that they are really not serious, in terms of, foreign policy and geopolitics and so forth. And Trump can't claim that this is fake news. He can't attack the media for this. There's no one-liner that's going to rescue this. This is basically set in stone, and Europeans are making jokes about it all week. So, I mean, it's not for America, who's a world superpower. It's really not what you want to be doing. That's all I'm going to say. And JD Vance should have paid attention in 8th grade history class as well, because he would have told the president, don't do it. But I'm wondering, does anybody know anything in this administration? I wonder sometimes.
Yeah, I wonder too.